Some stories feel too brutal, too surreal to be real. Even for those who've heard hundreds of true crime cases, there are crimes that redefine the meaning of horror. And few cases are as disturbing as what happened to a young California woman in 1977. Her name was Colleen Stan. At 20 years old, she set out on what should have been a simple trip hitchhiking to visit a friend for her birthday. It was something she'd done many times before. She trusted the road. She trusted her instincts. And usually, they didn't fail her.
From the surface to the abyss, welcome to the depths of crime.
That day, the weather was cold and windy. She wore jeans, a sweater, and a plaid jacket. She carried a small bag with a change of clothes. By late afternoon, she'd already caught 2 rides and was making good progress north. Around 4 p.m., she tried to flag another car. Several stopped men driving alone, but something about them felt off. Her rule was firm: never ride with a lone male driver. She waited. Then she saw it, a small car slowing down. Inside was a young couple and their baby. A family. They looked close to her age, maybe a few years older. They smiled. They seemed harmless, safe, normal. So she got in. The driver was 23-year-old Cameron Hooker. His wife, Janice, was 19, holding their 8-month-old daughter. They chatted politely. They asked where she was headed, and they were driving the same direction. Everything seemed perfect. They stopped once at a gas station so Colleen could change her sweater. The couple was friendly, almost too friendly. For a moment, she wondered whether she should walk away, whether something felt wrong. But she was tired and close to her destination. She returned to the car. They offered her candy. They pointed out landmarks. They told her about ice caves in Northern California. And then Cameron suggested they stop to see one. Colleen didn't want to, but she didn't want to be rude. A few miles later, he pulled off the road. Janice stepped out with the baby. Cameron slid into the passenger seat beside Colleen. Before she could react, he held a knife to her throat. He told her to lift her hands. She froze. He handcuffed her wrists behind her back, gagged her mouth, blindfolded her eyes, and tied her legs. Then he reached for an object she had noticed earlier, a strange wooden box. Heavy, padded, designed for one purpose. He lowered it over her head. Darkness swallowed her. Sound disappeared. Air thinned. She lay trapped, unable to scream. Cameron covered her body with a sleeping bag, called his wife back inside, and drove away. Colleen couldn't tell how long they drove. Minutes felt like hours. Every breath was a fight. Every jolt of the car a reminder that she was no longer in control of her life. By the time the car stopped, she was drenched in fear. She was carried into a basement. The box was removed. She saw Cameron. He warned her not to scream. Then he chained her arms to a pipe along the ceiling. When she hung suspended, he beat her with a whip. Janice entered the room. The couple stared at Colleen as if she were not human, as if she were an object. When they finished, Cameron returned her to the box and later locked her inside a wooden coffin-like crate. Hours passed, then days. No light, no voice, no food, no water. Only pain and terror. She believed she would die there. And in a way, a part of her did. Cameron treated the basement as his own private chamber of cruelty. He called it the workshop. For Colleen, it became a place where time lost meaning. She never knew whether it was day or night. Only that suffering came in cycles. He beat her, bound her, suspended her from rafters. He tested her limits like she was an experiment, not a human being. Every time she thought the pain couldn't get worse, it did. And yet, Cameron himself had no tragic origin story, no violent past, no childhood filled with trauma. He came from a typical family, raised by parents who, by all accounts, loved him. He attended school, kept to himself, and later found work at a lumber mill. He wasn't popular. He wasn't charming. Girls didn't pay attention to him. He was ordinary, except for the fantasies he kept hidden. At 19, he met Janice, a shy, insecure 14-year-old. She was easy to control, eager for attention, desperate for love. Cameron shaped her into exactly what he wanted. At first, he was gentle, caring. Then came the requests. Dangerous requests, physical requests, pain disguised as intimacy. She didn't want to do them, but he convinced her that it was normal. Eventually, his fantasies escalated beyond what she was willing to endure. She tried to refuse. He pressured her, manipulated her, frightened her. She was trapped before she even understood what was happening. They married when she was 16. He was 21. To others, they looked like a quiet young couple starting a simple life. Behind closed doors, Cameron's fantasies took full control. He wanted power, total power, and Janice wasn't enough. He told her he needed another woman, a woman who would never say no, never resist, never question him. A woman he would own. He told Janice she had two choices, accept it or lose him entirely. Convinced she had no value without him, she agreed. She would let her husband take a slave, as long as he promised never to sleep with her. He agreed, and Colleen Stan became the target of his obsession. Cameron didn't abduct her on impulse. He had prepared. Designed devices, built cages, practiced restraints. He had been waiting for the right victim. Colleen spent most of her days inside a wooden box barely larger than her body, sometimes up to 23 hours a day. Only pulled out when he wanted to torture her or force her into labor. She was given scraps instead of meals, forbidden to speak without permission, forced to use a plastic pan in the box as a toilet. Every basic human dignity was stripped away piece by piece. Over time, Cameron decided that physical control wasn't enough. He wanted mental ownership too. So he created a lie one that would become the key to breaking her completely. He told her about the company, a secret organization that supposedly monitored slaves across the country. He claimed they watched everything she did, that they would kill her if she tried to escape. He said the company had eyes everywhere, including in the police. If she ever tried to run or speak out, he warned, her entire family would be tortured and murdered. In that moment, hope died. Colleen believed him. After months, locked in darkness, starved, beaten, isolated, her mind fractured. The world he created became the world she accepted. He presented her with a slave contract, a document declaring that she surrendered her freedom, her body, even her name. From that day forward, she wasn't Colleen. She was simply Kay. Cameron placed a collar around her neck. He told her she was owned, body and soul. She signed the contract, not because she wanted to, but because she believed refusing would kill everyone she loved. Strangely, this new phase gave her a tiny amount of freedom. She was allowed out of the box more often. She could clean, cook, fold laundry. She could breathe. But that freedom came with new rules. If Cameron shouted, "Attention," she had to strip instantly. Lift her arms, stand on her toes, eyes down, silent. She held the position until he released her. It wasn't discipline. It was domination. Years passed. 7 long years of torture, manipulation, starvation, and fear. Cameron's cruelty evolved. He suspended her, beat her, threatened her, and continued to use the company to control her thoughts. Colleen adapted to survive. She learned to read his moods, to stay quiet, to avoid provoking him. In her mind, staying alive meant obeying every order. Escape wasn't an option. Not when she believed an invisible force was watching. Over time, Cameron convinced himself she loved him. He fantasized about building a deeper family, one where Colleen would become a second wife, another symbol of his control. Meanwhile, Janice, The woman who once believed she was powerless began to see the truth. She watched her husband grow darker, more violent, more obsessed. His cruelty toward Colleen no longer looked like fantasy. It looked like pure evil. Janice turned to religion for strength. She visited church, spoke to pastors, read scripture. The more she connected with the outside world, the more she realized how twisted Cameron truly was. Colleen, too, found moments of quiet faith. She would whisper prayers when no one watched, clutching onto the small belief that she might one day see her family again. But Cameron had new plans. He wanted more slaves, at least 4. He dug a hole near their home, intending to build an underground bunker. He forced Colleen to help him shovel dirt, creating what he imagined would be a secret prison. That was the breaking point for Janice. She realized that if he could do this to strangers, he could eventually do it to her, and even to her children. She was done believing the lie that he was merely different. One afternoon, while Cameron was at work, Janice made a decision. She quietly approached Colleen, trembling. She told her the truth. There is no company. It never existed. Cameron made it up. You're free. For the first time in 7 years, the world shifted. Colleen didn't believe it at first. She couldn't. Fear had been her prison long before the box. But Janice insisted. She handed her money. She drove her to a bus station. Before leaving, Colleen made one last call to Cameron. She told him she was going home. He cried, begged, pleaded. The man who once believed he owned her now feared losing control. Colleen hung up. She stepped onto the bus. 2,640 days after her nightmare began, Colleen Stan was finally free. But freedom didn't mean healing. Not yet. She didn't go to the police immediately. Trauma bound her to silence. Even after escape, she wrote letters to Cameron and Janice. She believed part of the lie still held power. Janice eventually found the courage to leave Cameron for good. She destroyed his torture devices, fled with her children, and reached out for help. And this time, she told everything. Police opened a full investigation. Janice described the kidnapping, the torture, the years of abuse, and the underground bunker. She also revealed something darker. Colleen might not have been the first victim. She said there had been another girl, a 19-year-old named Marie Elizabeth Spanhake, a young woman who vanished in 1976 and was never seen again. Janice admitted she helped lure her into their car. According to Janice, Cameron tortured Marie just as he did Colleen, except Marie didn't survive. Janice described the killing, the disposal, the location. But when investigators searched, there were no remains. Without a body, the murder charge couldn't stand. Cameron Hooker faced trial only for what he did to Colleen Stan: kidnapping, torture, and sexual violence that lasted 7 unbearable years. In court, Cameron claimed that Colleen loved him, that their relationship was consensual, that she stayed because she wanted to. He painted himself as a misunderstood man, not a sadistic captor. But Colleen's testimony, her calm, quiet recounting of horror, left the courtroom frozen. Jurors didn't just hear her story. They felt its weight. They understood that survival sometimes looks like silence, surrender, obedience. Cameron Hooker was convicted on multiple charges. He received a sentence of 104 years in prison. He later sought parole twice. Both requests were denied. Colleen rebuilt her life. She changed her name, married, became a mother and grandmother. And instead of letting trauma define her, she began helping women escaping abuse, becoming a survivor who saves survivors. Janice also changed her life, working as a counselor and supporting victims of violence. She carries guilt, but she also carries responsibility for helping Colleen finally escape. The case of Colleen Stan remains one of the most extreme, disturbing, and psychologically complex kidnappings in American history. A story not just of cruelty but of unimaginable endurance. Stories like this pull us into the darkest corners of human behavior. And yet, in those depths, we find survivors who refuse to break. Colleen Stan endured 7 years in captivity and still found a way to rebuild her life. If this case stayed with you, there are many more stories still hidden in the shadow stories we uncover here, together in the depths of crime. Subscribe for more true crime investigations told with the detail, respect, and depth they deserve. And if you found this case compelling, leave a like. It truly helps the channel reach new viewers. Thank you, and take care.